Good morning. Good morning, folks. And just a reminder, folks, this is part 2 of the de-escalation course. If you weren't here for part 1, you may want to reconsider whether you're going to stay or not, because unfortunately we can't give credit for only one part of the learning community conversation. You're more than welcome to stay, but you will have missed the first part. So, and we unfortunately can only give credit for the full 6 hours. Before we officially start, but thinking about, you may remember that one of our colleagues in the learning community in part 1 shared that link for the video. And I don't know, Kristen's like, I don't know if I remember that link. But you may recall that there was a video that was suggested. And if you got a chance to watch it, great. We're going to start our learning community conversation with a discussion about that. And if you didn't get a chance to watch it, don't worry. We'll put the link in the chat again. It's about a 18-minute video. I'll get the link, I'll find it and put it in the chat again at some point too. And just a reminder too, today we will conclude our learning community conversation promptly at 12 noon. And I will try and leave a little bit of time at the conclusion, after we've covered all the material. I'll try and leave a little bit of time at the end so that you can complete the evaluation and be done by 12 noon. So I'll do my best to work on that. Thank you so much, Susan Beth. I believe that's Susan Beth put the link for the YouTube video in the chat. Thank you so much. And Susan Beth put the link for the video in the chat. If you didn't get a chance to see it, don't worry. We are going to talk about it just as a way to begin our conversation today. So folks, we're going to go ahead and officially, I guess, get started. Not that we sort of haven't already, but if you haven't had a chance to do so and you aren't, your hands are not occupied with the steering wheel or some other important device, please feel free to put your full name into the chat at this particular moment, just to make sure, if you haven't done so already. I want to make sure that thanks Ashley, thanks Lindsay, Hillary, wonderful. Just want to make sure everybody who's participating gets credit for their participation in part 2 of our 6-hour learning community conversation on de-escalation. And folks, you may recall we had talked about taking a few moments to discuss this video. If folks had the chance to watch it, I had the opportunity to watch it. I want to thank Jason for sharing it with us. I believe, and I'll hold off as to why I have this belief, but I believe it is very relevant to our discussion about de-escalation. And I'm just wondering of anyone who got a chance to view it. And don't worry if you didn't, Susan Beth has your back. She put the link in the chat and shared it with you. You can always watch it another time, preferably not now, but you can watch it another time. And I just want to invite people who maybe had a chance to watch the video to unmute and to share any thoughts or any reactions with us about the video, how you feel it's relevant to our learning community conversation about de-escalation. So I just wanted to, because again, it was very generous of Jason to offer that link to us. I just wanted to ask if there were any thoughts or any reactions to the particular video. So again, yeah, go ahead, Alvin, please, feel free. And Alvin's in the process of unmuting. There you go.
Okay. You know, I watched it. I thought it was funny. You know, the guy had a good way of presenting it. It was really funny. And what I liked about it was it's 2 sides. One, let's look at what the other person's thoughts, intentions are. And then 2, let's look at ourselves, because there may be some truth in what's being said.
Yeah, I found that really powerful, and I'll tell you, Alvin, I found it a little unexpected too. Like he began with, "Well, it's not about me," but then all of a sudden, the flip side of the coin was, "Well, actually, maybe it is about me."
Right. Yeah.
I was surprised by that. I don't know, were you? I
Yeah,
was.
I was, because really I thought it was all going to be about the other person, the other
Uh-huh.
person's wrong. But and the fact that he took a job as a referee, that was really good. Because we always boo the refs, they're not good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Alvin. Yeah, Noel, what were your thoughts? What were your reactions? And I see that a number of people are putting their thoughts in the chat too. So we'll take a moment to look at those. But I see your hand, Noel. So please go ahead, take the floor.
I thought it came right out of the book, The Four Agreements.
Uh-huh.
Take nothing personal. It was exactly that. And so I thought it was interesting that somebody took it on as a TED Talk. Have you ever read The Four Agreements?
I've heard of it. I think I've read it, but it was a while. One is don't take anything personally. Another is be true to your word.
Impeccable.
Impeccable with your word. And what are the other two, Noel?
Don't assume anything, basically.
Okay.
Do your best.
Do your best.
Yeah.
Do your best.
Yeah. So I just thought, oh, this is right out of the book,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And yet with a twist, because don't take it personally. It's not about you. And yet maybe it is about you. And how do we address when it is about us?
right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it made me think of our discussion about triggers and buttons.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, as well. So let's see. Thank you so much, Noel, and good morning, by the way.
Good morning.
Yes. And let's see, some folks have put some things in the chat. Let's take a look at those. I like the whole thing. Heather says, I like the whole thing, but the end got me. And Heather, I'd be very curious to know what your thoughts are about that, because I had a very similar reaction too. Anna, I enjoyed it. I felt it had a lot to do with our last conversation we had, especially with reminding ourselves it's not always us. Charles, I thought it was very appropriate to the discussion, and I agree. It was very humorous and a level of insight that I didn't expect. Yeah, my feeling exactly. The video made me stop and think that some things are out of our control. Wow, I would agree with you there, 100%. I agree. I had to do some self-reflection. Yes, referees have been blamed for many major sports wins and losses. Reminds me of the Four Agreements book. Sounds familiar, right, Noel? Susan Beth says, I also felt that he did a great job explaining his feelings, explaining how perspectives are relative. Yes, we can feel things and address them, but not take things personally, but validate them as we feel them. Excellent. Yes. Agreed. Anything else? I agree with, I think Heather put this in the chat, but I also had a very strong reaction to the end, because I thought, like, what is he doing with that 20 euros? Why is he chewing it up? Why did he just stamp on it on the floor? I thought that was a very, very powerful message about not losing value. Very, very intense. And if you haven't had a chance to see the video, forgive me if I've just been a spoiler and told you the end, but it'll make more sense once you see it, I think. Any other thoughts, any other reactions about the video that anybody would like to share? And I'm going to just check the chat. Okay. All right. So again, I want to thank Jason for sharing that with us. I want to thank you for making the time to look at it. If you didn't get a chance to look at it, please do take a moment. There's one other thing that I want to underline here, and I think it's very relevant to our discussion. I think all of it's relevant to our discussion about de-escalation, but there's one particular moment, and I'm wondering if anybody else recalls this, when he talked about how the 50,000 thoughts a day and 10,000 of those thoughts are positive, And 80% of the thoughts are negative, which I thought was fascinating, how that, that whole idea we talked about, it's an inside, wellness and self-care, you may recall if you were in that learning community conversation, is an inside job. Yeah, and it's very interesting, Noel. I wondered that too, like, where did he get that data? Because he doesn't cite it. He just kind of offers it as kind of a factoid. But I was struck by it because he said, and people do a lot of work on their thinking. Cognitive behavioral therapy is all about how you can intentionally focus on changing your thoughts, which then change your feelings and then change your behavior. But he talked about, well, this inner voice, well, I became a referee, but I've never played soccer. All these like things about how we might give ourselves negative messages. And I felt it was so relevant because that's why de-escalation is not something we do alone. Because we can go into our own heads. We could start to blame ourselves for the situation. We could start to criticize what we do. And that's where the knowing that you're part of a team and that you have somebody to debrief with or a team to debrief with is a way. And he mentioned this, that there's a certain amount of vulnerability involved. And de-escalation, the whole process is inviting us to engage in a level of vulnerability as well, because it may mean we reflect on and think about, what might I do differently? What do I think I did well? How can the team function more effectively? And Samantha writes, as a family therapist, I can relate to being a referee and being blamed. Yes. Understood. All right. So folks, you may recall, and I know it was a while ago, but you may recall when we started to bring part one of our conversation to a conclusion, we talked about a model that helped us think about the process of de-escalation from 4 different sort of aspects. And we went through each of those aspects as a way to be kind of a framework for thinking about how we want to approach and how we want to be in the process. Lyra, we did discuss the video. Was there something that you wanted to say about it? And don't hesitate to unmute. We did discuss it, and we can continue to discuss it if there's something that you'd like to add. So I'm willing to pause for a moment before I just remind us of
excuse me. Thank you, Paul. Good morning to everyone. And again, excuse my lateness. I do not want to bring you back. I thought the video was very good. It was very interesting. And there were definitely points taken as far as not taking things personally, because I think that everyone, it's safe to say, has been in that place where we have taken something personally that may not have been intended to be personal. So that's all.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you said that and added that, Lyra, because it did kind of reinforce for me. Sometimes when we're in the process of de-escalating, or we're in that moment of de-escalating, and maybe the person who's in the escalated situation is kind of saying to us, like, it's your fault that I didn't get this, benefit. It's you didn't help me do this. You didn't, they're blaming it all on you. That could be a situation where one could sort of feel like, oh, I could start taking this personally. And again, I think the beauty of that video is the idea that part of it is not about us. And we can also, as professionals, take responsibility for any part of it that may be about us. And is there anything that we need to reflect on, either about our own confidence about our work and maybe about the work that we did? Is there any truth in what's being said? So just keeping that in mind too. Jason, I see your hand is up. Go right ahead.
Yeah, when I found the video, like I said, I was working in a treatment facility, and there's a lot of times, we just take things personally. And I was really struggling with facilitating because that crosstalk would just drive me like. There was a couple times I snapped on the class, right? So, which isn't good, especially when you're in a treatment facility. It's not good to snap. But when I watched this video to help me, that part of how to, maybe it is about me, and it really pushed me to reflect inward, which now I try to practice more than just in groups, right? And it's helped me. I've been in recovery for 9 years myself, so it's helped me take my recovery to that next level as we continue to grow. And just that it's powerful, just not to, you have to reflect in. We're always seeking approval, right?
Yeah.
When we don't have to, we should be seeking, hey, did I do a good job, right?
Yeah.
But it also uncovered a lot of my insecurities when it comes to being in a group. So it was just very helpful, and that's why I wanted to share with you guys. Every time a new group would come in, I'd share that video kind of right at the beginning, to kind of help them understand why I'm so adamant about no crosstalk, none of this, because you have people, popcorn reading and stuff like that. They might be afraid to read because they hear that giggle, that whatever, and it could stunt their recovery.
Sure.
So that's why I find it very powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. And I thank you for sharing it with the learning community. Araceli writes, as a former child welfare worker, it resonates a lot. Many clients would ultimately blame the social worker and agency for what was happening to them, especially the removal of their children. It was very hard not to take things personally, and then having to think of the children. Many times I doubted what I was doing. However, I had to think back and remind myself that neither I or the agency was the one that had harmed the children. Yeah, absolutely. And Araceli, you just underlined something that Jason said, and this is so relevant to de-escalation, and you may recall in that sort of breakdown of the different steps, reflection is critical. The ability to reflect on what happened, the ability to reflect on how you felt about the situation after the fact, and even during it, if you have the capacity to do that. So the ability to do that, and Jason, you shared a very specific example when you talked about snapping on the class, because without that reflection, that pattern could continue. And that would be bad for the class, that would be bad for Jason, that would be bad for the field, that would be bad for the agency. And it's the self-reflection, the ability to reflect yourself, the ability to reflect during a debrief, the ability to reflect during supervision. All of that really does speak to this idea of the reflection and being able to think back. And the way we get better at what we do is by doing it and then assessing, how do we do? And what might we do differently? And de-escalation, the process of de-escalation, we do that on an individual level. Hopefully we do that on a team level. Hopefully we do that on a program level, and hopefully as an agency or an organization providing services, we're doing that as well. Okay. You may recall that we did talk about the care, welfare, safety, and security model, those 4 elements that we want to be using as our framework or our lenses. And I have a slide that I'd like to show you that has a very famous quote by Maya Angelou. And if you can complete Oh yes, Lyra, thanks for putting your name in the chat, although we knew you were here. It would be so nice to have it at the agency level. Charles, I agree with you 100%. And I agree with you in the sense that it would be, not only would it be nice, it would also be beneficial to everybody and to the agency to have it at an agency level. So I'm going to show you this quote, and you'll notice that the last few words of the quote are missing. So if you can complete the last few words of the quote, please go ahead and type them in the chat. And I haven't shown it to you yet, so you can't complete it if you haven't seen it yet. I love it when some people come up with an idea, but finish the quote if you can, and then we'll talk about how it relates to de-escalation. So here we go. I'm about to show it to you. And if you can complete this very famous, I think very powerful quote, feel free and just type it in the chat. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you, and I see some people are putting it in the chat. Let's see if anybody's got it.
How you made them feel, sorry.
Yes, that's all right. That's wonderful. Yes, how you made them feel, which is related to how you treated them. Yeah, and how you made them feel. And watch this, the magic of Zoom will complete, actually it's the magic of PowerPoint, how you made them feel. Now, I'm curious, yeah, how you treated them, Alvin, absolutely. And again, how you treated them is how you made them feel. I agree, Jason, I love Maya Angelou as well. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because how is that quote, and especially that last part, relevant to our discussion about de-escalation? They won't remember what you said, they won't remember what you did, but they will remember how you made. Yeah, go ahead, Goldie, what do you think? How do you think this is relevant to our discussion? Go ahead.
I'm trying to get on camera so you can see me. Okay,
Yeah.
good morning. Okay, good morning again.
There you go.
How you make them feel that even though they might be all out of the place and all over the place, that you're giving them value and that you're showing them that they are important at that moment, or in that moment, should I say. That you're making them feel that what they have to say is valid, even though they might be a little bit off the wall, but in that moment, they are being recognized and valued.
Yes, and I want to underline what Goldie is saying, because she said two very powerful things, that they are being recognized and they know they are valued. And, you know, I think Goldie maybe put this in a nicer way than maybe some of us have actually experienced, or I'll make an I statement. Goldie kind of sugar-coated it a little bit when she said, well, they might be a little off the wall. I've had situations where people have been like off the wall.
Or maybe I shouldn't have said that, off the wall.
I understood. I understood, but I also want to keep it real.
Right.
And I'm just making an I statement here. And as hard as it can be, the fact that the person feels acknowledged,
Yes.
and they feel that they are being valued.
Yes.
Wow, what an impact that can actually have. Yeah. Lyra, what are your thoughts? How do you think it's relevant?
Thank you. Good morning again. I think that, echoing on what Goldie said,
Yeah.
how it made them feel is personal. It is what I said, what I do is what I say, what I do. How I make you feel is you. Now it is a way of feeling. She's seeing me, she's hearing me, she's acknowledging me. And the words may be forgotten. Again, the actions may be forgotten, but the feelings are lasting forever because they're part of me. The words may not be taken as part of me, but the feelings are mine.
Yep.
I don't know if I verbalized that clearly.
No, I think I'm understanding what you're saying. And, you know, I think you're speaking also to the intensity of when someone's in an escalated state. Think about it, folks. When a person is escalated, they're operating, you know, fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. They're operating on a level that maybe their thinking isn't what it would be if they weren't in that state. So they're getting a much stronger sense of what's the overall feeling of this interaction, as opposed to the specificity of maybe what's said and what's happening. Behavior, Will Marie writes, behavior more powerful than words. People need to feel seen, heard, understood. Thanks, Sean. Lydia writes, it's easier to de-escalate when you treat people with respect. They are being heard. It can, Alvin writes, it can reduce the tension or the escalation. And Lucy, I think, poses a really great question. You know, how would you like to be treated? Absolutely. Becky writes, when given grace and met with where they are, it creates a safe space, which to me is key to de-escalate. Lyra agrees with that 100%. All right. So folks, I'm going to share my screen again. And, you know, again, I wouldn't change this quote because it's so beautiful, but for our purposes, you know, you could say, I've learned that people who are in an escalated state will forget what you said. People who are in an escalated state will forget what you did. But people who are in an escalated state will never forget how you made them feel. And again, just something to consider about how our approach is so critical. We talked when we met last time, the idea of boundaries and setting boundaries kept coming up. And setting boundaries is often about timing. And often, of course, when somebody's in an escalated state, until their affect is sort of brought down, until they're able to have access to their thinking and their feeling, as opposed to being in an escalated state where they may not have the same kind of access. We want to be thinking about the timing of when we set limits. And when we set limits, these 5 bullets can be very helpful. We can explain if there's something going on that's inappropriate. We can explain specifically what behavior it is that may not be appropriate. We can explain why that specific, that which behavior is inappropriate. We can also help the person to consider what are the options in lieu of this particular behavior, and what are the options or the consequences if they continue with this particular behavior. And then the allowing time is letting a person have time to reflect on, because even the person who's de-escalated, who we may be setting limits with, they also need a time to be able to reflect. We can give them some time to reflect. And then, depending on what choice they make, we have to be prepared. If they make a particular choice, we have to be prepared to follow through on the consequences we've associated with that choice. I want to focus on this last bullet for a moment. Be prepared to enforce your consequences. Any thoughts or any reactions to that? So let's say you're setting limits with somebody. The person identifies, you know, you talk through a little bit. If you continue to do this, this is what could happen. These are alternates. And they say to you, well, you know what? I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing here. Why do you think that fifth bullet is emphasizing following through on consequences? What's your thought or what's your reaction to that? So yeah, go ahead, Goldie. What do you think?
I can tell you for me, because as I said to you before in our very first meeting, that for a lot of my students, many of my students, I taught their mothers and their fathers.
Right.
And you know, and I've been around for 30 years. So when you have that intimate connection with them, I think that that's a key as well. And I saw someone say that showing them some grace. So I'm like, you know, I'm gonna let you get that off, but you know I should have wrote you up. You know you should be doing about 5 days. Yeah, Miss G, yeah, Miss Golden, I know. So you know what, I'm gonna let you get that for now. Don't make, and so I think it all depends on the connection that you have with either your students or your clients, and that they know that, yeah, I called a break this time and I'm not going to continue with this. You know, I have better coping mechanisms that when I get angry or upset or I'm bothered, I know how to approach that in a better manner.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Thanks, Goldie. What do you think, Wayne? I see your hands raised. Go ahead.
Well, if you don't follow through on whatever the consequences, it just becomes like an empty, you know, for like a threat, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I see parents do it a lot. You know, they say they're going to do this and do that, and then they don't follow through. Matter of fact, reward bad behavior with, you know. So if you don't follow through, then it's just empty.
Okay. Okay. So it's empty. Excellent. Lyra, what do you think? And then I see a couple of people are putting some things in the chat, and then Alicia wants to add something too. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a saying, what you tolerate will never change. And if the desired expectation is change, then there has to be circumstances centering around that change, and that includes consequences. So following through with the consequences, in my opinion, is very important, even though it may be difficult because you may not want to impose or have the consequences, you know, carried out, but it's a lesson learned. And sometimes it's that consequence that now helps the individual to realize, you know, I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to feel this again.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Alicia, what do you think?
I think what we spoke about on Friday or last week, Thursday, that consistency builds trust. And so if you are consistent in your word and saying, well, if you do this, this is a consequence, and if you're inconsistent, it's not going to build trust. The patient or the client will know that, oh, she don't mean what she says she's going to do. So I think consistency is essential in building a rapport with that person.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And thanks for linking it to trust as well. Alvin, go ahead. Yeah, I see you have your hand up, please.
Yeah, my thought is the consequences have to match the offense. Okay. So then you stand your ground. You know, but if the punishment exceeds the offense, you know, then it doesn't make sense to the person, to the client, to the staff. So there has to be a balance. And also someone mentioned, I think it was Wayne, we grow up in life where there are consequences, and we need to understand their consequences. Otherwise, you know, what good is law and order? What good is rules?
Right. And that's kind of touching on what Wayne, and I see you have your hand raised again, Wayne, we'll let you comment. I just want to underline that, Alvin, you know, you're connecting that very clearly to what Wayne said about the emptiness. If you don't follow through on consequences, then it's an empty sort of, I don't think you used the word threat, Wayne, but I think that word was coming. You avoided it, but I think that word was coming. Go ahead. You wanted to add something else.
No, I was just gonna say that I think it's human nature. People, they do what they can get away with. You know what I'm saying? And so it's not, just like clients. So, I've been a supervisor or whatever. People do what they can get away with, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's just human nature sometimes. I mean, some people just genuinely do what they're supposed to do. But I think if there's no consequences, people won't really respond to whatever you want them to do.
Okay. Now, I don't know if anybody noticed this, if you remember it, and I know I didn't show you the slide very long, but if you remember it, there was a bullet just before the bullet of be prepared to carry out consequences. Does anybody recall what that bullet before was? And I'll show it to you in a minute. I'm just curious if anybody remembers. It was 2 words. Yeah, go ahead, Noelle. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was explain which behavior and why, or
actually that was even further above.
Oh, okay.
Give time. If my memory serves me correctly.
Your memory serves you correctly. It was allow time. And folks, part of the reason, and Noelle, you're not wrong. It was that was bullets were just higher up, but it was allow time. And the reason for that, folks, is because we want to allow time for the person, the patient, the client to choose their consequence. So it's about allowing them the autonomy. They're the one who chooses. And that's also why we have to be prepared to carry it out, because either it'll be empty or, there's a lot of subtlety that you're all bringing to this, which doesn't surprise me given this learning community. But as Alvin said earlier, the consequences do have to be related with the boundary that's being set. If the consequences far exceed the boundary, there's something wrong there. The consequences they're not right. They're not in the right proportion. The other thing that Goldie said, and again, she kind of threw this idea out last week too, which I think is a critical one. We do have to factor our relationship in with the person, what we know about them or what we don't know about them. That has to be factored in too. And again, the idea of that we discuss very openly what the consequences are, and we allow time for the person to choose what it is they're going to choose. Now, there are a number of other things that came in the chat. I just want to make sure. Miyoshi writes, if you continue to give the individual a pass, they will not change their behavior. Very true. Ashley writes, if there is no consequence, there is no behavior change, and others will not respect you. Absolutely. Samantha writes, I agree with Lyra. What you permit, you promote. Freddie, consequences should be a learning experience and not a form of punishment. That's a very, very powerful and I think important perspective, Freddie, and thank you for putting that in writing in the chat. Jason writes, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I want to change myself. That's a quote from Rumi. Lest we confuse that maybe that was a quote from Jason, but he's giving credit to Rumi. And yes, it was allow time. Kristen, you're absolutely right. Time to reflect, Hillary. Samantha writes, being consistent as well. No passes for anyone because everyone is expected to be responsible and respectful. Maynard writes, accountability is important to accepting consequences. Yeah. So yeah, Wayne, did you want to add something? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, we all have free will, and, I was just thinking about even this training, you told us last week that we had to attend both of these trainings or you weren't going to get the credits. So that's a consequence,
right.
It's a consequence, and I could make that choice either, to show up or not. Even when you sign on, it says something about do you agree to do this? Now, maybe that one is not enforced as much, you know, to keep your camp. But I know if I didn't show up this morning, that the other 3 was going to go. So that's why, I'm here. I mean, enjoy it. But that was just a consequence of it, you know. So I don't know. Like I said, every day we face with consequences. And we all got free will. You can do what you want, you know.
Yeah.
It's a consequence.
Yeah, and you know, it's powerful because it is, people can exercise their autonomy, and they don't exercise their autonomy in a vacuum. And there are consequences based on that. And your example is a perfect one. If you chose for whatever reason not to come to today's part 2, if you chose for whatever reason to come to the first, 30 minutes of today's part 2, the consequence is that you get 0 credit, even if you attended the whole 3 hours. That was the agreement, and that's the framework. So, and again, people can choose to be in that framework, or they can choose, as Wayne is saying, they can opt out of it, which all of this is wonderful preparatory conversation. And Lyra writes, consequences or regrets. Yeah, because sometimes people can have regrets about the choices. But again, that can be part of a learning experience. You know, maybe that wasn't the best choice. Maybe I'll choose something different going forward, because the outcome is not an outcome I want to repeat. Just something to consider. I'm going to share my screen, and I'd like to introduce you. I think I'm at the point of introducing you. I am, to Jody. Now, before you read this little scenario, and before I let the computer recording of my voice read it to you out loud, let me say that there are 3 dramatic characters in this scenario. And I'm only saying they're dramatic characters because they're in a scenario. There is Jody, who is the resident who's living in the women's transitional housing. There is Andy. Andy is Jody's boyfriend. He is visiting Jody in the transitional housing setting. And then there is Dave. Dave is the worker. Dave is us. We are Dave. Dave is the worker who is on staff this particular evening. Having underlined that, Jody is the resident, Andy is the visitor, Jody's boyfriend, and Dave is the employee on staff. I'm going to let the computer read this to you out loud if you haven't read it out loud already, and then let's talk about it. Jody is a client in the Women's Transitional Housing Program. It's Friday night, and her boyfriend Andy is visiting her in her room. Andy is still visiting, and it's past the required curfew time. Dave, the staff person on site, knows this is against the program guidelines. He's concerned about going up to Jody's room to ask Andy to leave, because Jody is known to cause a scene. So far, it's been a quiet night, and Dave wants to keep it that way. So, before we that's the scenario. So before we discuss the scenario, a quick test. And I'm using the word test, T with a capital T, a quick test. I am going to state the name of one of the 3 dramatic players in our scenario. Well, actually, I'm going to state their role, and you type the name of the person, okay? Type the name of the staff person. Who is the staff person in our scenario? Yes, it is Dave. Excellent. Who is the resident? Type that person's name in the chat. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And we have about 68 people in the learning community, so let's get everybody. Excellent. And Dave is the staff person. Dave is the staff person. And who is the boyfriend? Type the boyfriend's name. And remember, the boyfriend is a visitor. Now, this is not a trick question. In this scenario, who are we? We are who in the scenario? Yes, type it in the chat. As quick, we're the staff, we're Dave. We are Dave. And yes, our role is a staff person. Super, good. So that's all clear. Okay, that's all clear. We know who everybody is. We know who we are. Yes, I love that, Lydia. Dave-staff. Absolutely. It doesn't get more specific than that. So, any thoughts, any reactions? Sania writes, it's not going to be a quiet shift for Dave, resident Jody, Mike, boyfriend. Actually, Andy is the boyfriend. I'm not sure who Mike is. So yeah, go ahead, Wayne. Any thoughts, any reactions to the scenario? And then we'll go to Alvin. Go ahead.
If Dave doesn't say anything, I mean, sometimes, you know, you're going to take the path of the least resistance and just let it be. But I believe that they created Jody. This is not the first time, because it's not the first time this happened. So she thinks, you know, now she's going to make a scene. That's why you have to set the tone from the beginning that this is unacceptable.
Okay. So let me just clarify before we go to Alvin. We'll go to Lyra, and then I think Goldie, you want to add something as well, because you're unmuted, but I could be wrong. Oh, okay, I see your hand now. Yep, Goldie wants to say something too. So I just want to be clear, Wayne, that I'm understanding you, that you're suggesting that a line needs to be drawn for Jody. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, and I'm just suggesting, I mean, it's not there, but I believe that this wasn't, I was saying this wasn't the first time that, you know, now she's going to make this scene.
Yep.
And if it was set down that you know, this is unacceptable, she's not going to keep, she wouldn't keep trying it, because she'll know what the consequences are. And that's and that is what happens when you don't set, you know, boundaries.
Okay.
Can I interject right there? Can I interject? Why? That's very presumptuous.
Goldie, you can. You can. I just want to acknowledge you're jumping the line, but go ahead.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I'm going to let you and Alvin and Lyra fight it out in a minute. But
no, I want to fight it out with who is that? Wayne.
With Wayne, yeah. Go ahead.
That's good morning, sir. I think that's very presumptuous on your part that you would say that this is the first time. I mean that it's not the first time. Why would you assume that?
Yep. So let's pause for just a second. Let's just pause. Don't lose your thought, Alicia. Let's pause for just a second, because Goldie is having a strong reaction, which I love. I love that. And she's asking Wayne a question. She's saying, Wayne, based on what we know in the scenario, why would you assume that this is not the first time this has happened? I just want to be clear. That's the question you're asking, right, Goldie?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I'm going to, Alvin, please don't lose your thought. I'm going to let Wayne respond to Goldie's question, and then we're going to go to Alvin, Lyra, Noel, and then Alicia wants to say something too. But go ahead, Wayne. So based on Goldie's question, what was your thought, Wayne? What's your answer to Goldie's question?
Oh, I said that I believe that it wasn't the first time, because that, you know, she's having whatever this temper tantrum. And then once people, you know, once you know what the consequences are, you know, it could be the first time. But I said I believe that it wasn't, because she's having this reaction, and if she knew what the consequences were, you know, she's not gonna, people are not gonna keep trying you after a while, you know.
No. It said,
okay.
It didn't say that he has been, you know, her gentleman caller on several occasions. It just said, to my interpretation, that when she doesn't get her way about anything,
Yeah,
she
yep, yep.
turns up.
Yep. And Goldie just said something very powerful that I want to underline for everyone. And Goldie, there's such wisdom in what you just said, because what Wayne shared, and I love that this is happening because this doesn't always happen. What Wayne shared was his interpretation of the scenario, which prompted Goldie to have a very strong reaction and want to share her interpretation. And I want to throw out to you folks, there are about 69 people in this learning community conversation. And I'm going to throw out that there are probably 69, and we're about to hear from several others, but there are probably 69 different interpretations of this scenario. And I will also venture to throw out, and I'm going to make an I statement here, I bet my interpretation is right, just like everybody thinks their interpretation is right. So let's go to Alvin. We're going to go to Lyra, Noel, Alicia, and then we'll go to Jason.
I don't need to speak. I don't need to speak.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to check. Okay. So Alvin, the floor is yours, and thank you for your patience.
I like this here, and I'm going to take it from a management point of view.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. You definitely enforce the guidelines, the rules.
Okay.
Because not only that, Dave thinks he want a quiet night. That will be a repetition again and again.
Okay.
Then you're going to have other residents wanting the same thing because this happened. Right. And then you're going to have other staff members facing the same situation because if Dave doesn't step up, you know, so from a management point of view, it's a nightmare if you're not following the guidelines, you know. But now let me qualify this right now. It's not in there, but if there's some situation where Andy was late, let you know because of car situation or something like that, you can then extend him an extra 15 minutes because that's fair, and you can do that with the others. But just to let it go, hey, because because Jody is a disruptive person, not going to happen on my watch.
Okay. So we're going to go to Lyra, Noel, and then Jason. And again, I want to underline something because I'm so glad we're doing this scenario in this learning community, because Alvin, I want to underline some shift in your language as you talked about what you said. I noticed three things. One, you said, let me just frame this conversation from the manager's perspective. Powerful. I can see it very clearly. And then the first word that came out of your mouth was enforcement. Okay. That's a strong word, enforcement. And then the next thing that came out of your mouth after you sort of described that a little bit is what followed was possible exception given the realities of the situation. And you gave a beautiful example of like, well, what if Andy had car trouble? You know, we could make an exception because I'd have a better understanding of the situation. So I just want us all to note that as Alvin kind of shared that with us, he went through manager, enforcement, exception with a deeper understanding. And that's, Alvin, thank you, because that's a powerful process to go through as you think through. And keep in mind, folks, not one of the 69 of us has spoken to Jody yet. We're just talking about what we might do or what our reaction is to the scenario. Alvin, thank you. It's fantastic. We're going to go to Lyra. We're going to go to Noel, Jason, back to Wayne, and then to Goldie. Go ahead, Lyra. The floor is yours.
Echoing on what Alvin said, I would definitely, for the reasons that he has given, in addition to, I would not want to reinforce negative behavior. I would not want to reinforce breaking rules. I would not want to reinforce something that may create disruption and cause anarchy or continue behaviors, as he said, by other residents. Because now, once I allow it, then how can I justify in the future if it's not a quiet night? And now I'm like, okay, this is unacceptable, but it wasn't unacceptable yesterday.
Right.
So why is it unacceptable today?
Right.
Consistency.
Yes, and I believe one of our other colleagues in the learning community mentioned that idea of consistency and how we want to be consistent in what we communicate. Absolutely. Noelle, floor is yours.
I'm sorry. Just the final point with reinforcing a negative behavior, because if Dave is saying I don't want to address it because she tends to act out, then what I'm saying is acting out will enable certain behaviors to be permitted by one, where the other person who's compliant will not have that same courtesy.
That's right. Again, we are thinking this through. We are talking this through because, and again, I want to go back to what Alvin said before, because if we charge upstairs with enforcement on our minds, that may, how that enforcement, quote unquote, gets played out is going to make the difference between a positive interaction and experience for all or a difficult communication that potentially could be problematic for everybody. Noelle, the floor is yours. Thank you.
My interpretation of this, is to think about, the curfew rule, and that could be something established inside and outside of the community based on insurance, policing, a lot of different reasons. So it's not personal, and so I think maybe addressing the fact that it's not personal, it's a rule set to keep everyone in the community and outside the community safe. And so, there's a lot to think about there. So I would probably go into that more than such a personal, even my mind, I don't think would have went to, oh gosh, I have to tell her. Do you know what I mean? Because
I do.
I would understand the rule was set for other reasons.
Okay, so I want to underline something that Noelle is pointing out, and Noelle, I love the way you put it, and it really inspires me to sort of say it. That, and Lyra just wrote video, it's not all about me, is the idea that like helping Jody to see, like, Jody, we're not punishing you. This is a guideline that we have because it keeps the organization safe, it keeps the house safe, it keeps everybody safe. So helping her in a supportive way to see that it's not about her. So again, beautiful perspective. Jason, the floor is yours. And I also want to underline, I love the way Noelle began when she said, my interpretation of this. I love that.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason, floor is yours. Oh, Jason, we can't hear you. We see your lips moving, but we can't hear a word you're saying. Go ahead.
Right. I'm not going to dive into the interpretation piece, but more so how I would handle it. When I was being mentored and gone through anger management, a couple skills I picked up was you're consider yourself like a mailman. You have to deliver the mail. The dog might bark, you still got to deliver that mail. So she might bark at you, but you still got to deliver that message.
Okay.
When you prove to her that you're not going to waver, that you're going to deliver that message, that builds the trust, that starts building all of that. So, but on that, you have to also think of yourself as a weather, or like a newscaster. News people don't deliver the news with emotion. They deliver the news.
Okay.
But you have to remove, you know, the emotion out of it. If Jody's done it before, you can't match, you know, you can't wash dirty with dirty, right?
Yeah.
You have to,
Yeah.
Jody, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so that remembering, you have to deliver the mail and
Yeah.
you got to take the emotion out of delivering it. And that can help you navigate that, to, you know, keep you from being stressed, but also to let Jody know you're not going to waver, that this is the way it is, so on and so forth.
Yep.
I think so often we tie emotion into our deliveries
Yes.
that the client matches it, then boom, then we're all stressed out and all that good stuff. So that's just my two. I'm not going to interpret it. So.
Okay. Well, and you know, Jason, I would throw out for you to consider what you just offered is an interpretation, because you framed it with, this is how I would handle it, which is fantastic, because that's all that any of us would do. And I just want to acknowledge, in terms of language, Freddie mentioned ouch, letter carrier, not mailman, because not all letter carriers identify as male. Samantha, I like that, Jason, great example. Great job, Jason. Oh, no problem. No problem switching from laptop to phone. Yes, postal carrier. Yes, absolutely. Government employee, postal carrier. Excellent. Wayne, the floor is yours. And I want to thank Jason for also saying, I'm going to talk about the way I would handle it, because I want to also acknowledge, so far, no one in our learning community yet, no Dave here, because we're all Dave, no Dave here yet has spoken to Jody. We're still talking about how we might speak. Amanda writes, correspondence delivery professional. I like it. Let's see if we can get 6 or 7 other names for the individual, at least at this point, it's an individual who carries post, either in the form of letter, packages, or whatever, to our residents. PTSD, Alvin says. Okay. Go ahead, Wayne, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's funny. I worked for the Postal Service for 15 years prior to changing. And I didn't deal with the public. I worked inside. I used to work on a machine. And I used to work on this machine called flat sorter. But anyway, and I went into management. And anyway, it just made me think now that, you know, as being a supervisor, the people that I supervised, the only thing they responded to was threats and ultimatums. Anyway, I mean, that was it. You know, they had a union tell them, listen, all you got to do is have a pulse, you know. So if I needed to get the mail moved, that's what they respond to. But anyway, I'm glad for this forum, because, you know, and this is how I learned. I don't want anybody to, you know, to agree with me, because that's just the way, you know, I may view things. This is my interpretation. And as somebody put it, I am a social worker, so I'm a social worker now, and I guess sometimes I listen with a third ear. So I'm listening to what, you know, I'm reading behind things, and because it didn't say that in the scenario. But to me, probably what happens is, what's his name? Dave is not the only one that's on this that, you know, covers this shift. Right. So maybe I had somebody else on there that allows this. So this is what creates the problem. And what we had to do, we got to be consistent, got to have zero tolerance. Yep. You know, and I know it's sometimes hard because we are human. And then I was laughing when Alvin said about giving the 15 minutes. Yeah, but now I'm on the other side, I'm watching. Because now when you give her 15 minutes, I'm watching, the other class is watching, and if you don't give it, I'm gonna say, well, listen, you gave such and such 15 minutes. And all he was trying to do was to be human. But I'm just saying, if you're not consistent, yep. You know what I'm saying? Just like I said when we signed on here today, if I knew if I didn't sign on and I wasn't going to get that, but if I could finagle and, you know, do something and not show up, maybe I will, you know. And that's, like I said, I think that's just human nature, how sometimes people think. Not everyone, you know. I know, I must go for myself. A lot of times that's how I respond. I'm going to be honest, you know what I'm saying? I can get away with it. I can get away, I'm going to get away with it. Yeah. Thank you. That's it.
Got it. Thank you. And again, thanks for making I statements, Wayne. Goldie, the floor is yours. Can't hear you, Goldie. Now,
Who is that? That was Wayne. I'm ready to get him. My ex-husband.
I give us a strong reaction.
My ex-husband was a male. What did I put in the chat? A male, whatever technician, whatever you want to call him. He delivered the mail, right? No,
Yeah.
he did not deliver the mail when it was hot. No, he did not deliver the mail when it was ice and snow on the sidewalk or the steps. So you said that you can't equate that. I didn't like that analogy, but anyway, I think maybe I'm the only teacher on this call because I always talk about my students. And I must admit that I did have some that were my favorites.
you did?
I did. And I let them get away, but it always came back to bite me in the behind because it was like, well, Miss Golden, you let so-and-so, and it might've been the same infraction, but I showed someone else more grace than I showed the other. So Samantha put in her response, listen, get on that PA system, because this is not personal. This is all about business. Get on that PA system so it's clear across the board.
Yep.
That visiting out, and so that no one can say that they are being singled out. Now, going into my house, my recovery house,
Yeah.
I know they're getting ready to have a big house meeting, and I'm glad I'm not going to be there. They get ready to have, because, some folks been getting away with some stuff than others. So when I was driving the clients to the programs day, I said, listen, you have the opportunity to be heard. So say everything that you need to say and leave everything on the table. And if you all as a community need to come together and share in making your rules and your consequences, the rules as well as your consequences,
Sure.
then maybe,
Yeah.
So
Makes
thanks,
sense.
Wayne. I had to get at you. Thank you.
So Julie writes, this is a learning, nurturing opportunity for all, very dynamic setting that allow us to reflect even with live examples and experiences to enrich our experience. Yes. Susan Beth writes, I believe that the interpretation is personal, of course, and how you deliver your message is important. I couldn't agree with that more, Susan Beth. I think you're absolutely on to absolutely. It's about how you deliver the message. You want consistency and being able to go back to work and have a relationship that is based on trust and empathy, compassion, and understanding. Absolutely. It's reciprocal. And Jody may feel that she is entitled to bend the rules and not have consequences for her actions. However, stating that everyone in the residence needs to follow these rules for safety and no one is being treated differently. Yes. So again, somebody may have very different feelings about like, well, this rule doesn't apply to me, or I have the right to break this rule. And again, we might have to help them to realize that that is not the case. Alvin, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And the reason why I'm so passionate, I put in the chat, I was a nursing home administrator. Okay, so that's 24/7. Okay, so it's not just, and it's a group of people, and I've had that situation. And you would be surprised. It could go down to the meals. Okay. So let me just say again, I'm talking from real life experience for myself that I had to deal with. And we're not just talking residents. That's why I said from a management point of view, we're talking staff. What you let one staff do, guess what?
Right.
The other one, right?
Right.
Hey, not only that, now we haven't even reached the point. In the nursing home, we have to have a certain amount of staff, a certain amount of nurses, a certain amount of CNAs. Now, once you start getting to play favorites here, now your staff may not show up. So who's going to cover? And like I said, a nursing home, we're 24/7. So we're talking 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 1 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. So, that's why I like the example. And that's why I was so excited about it, because that's real. That's real, you know. And what I said was, once Andy or Jody spoke to me about what happened or why they want this guy Andy to stay a little longer, based on that reasoning, because things happen, you know.
Right.
My car broke down, you know, it was a traffic accident, so I can extend you those extra minutes, and I can do that to anyone else.
Yep.
If they let me know what's going on.
Yep.
And it'll be the same 15 minutes, you know.
Yep.
So that I can do, and that will win Jody over. That'll win Andy over. That'll win Dave and all the others over, because you have that flexibility to depending on what's going on. So again, I want to thank you very much for letting me go on. You know, that example really hit hard. It hit to the heart, you know, and that's why I came from the management point of view. Man, that thing could really blow up. And see, the postal service, they don't deliver mail after 7. Okay, so they can say whatever they want. Okay, we're talking 7 p.m. I've received phone calls 10 p.m. at night, 1 p.m., 1 a.m. in the morning. Heck, that's why I'm no longer in the field. It just got to be a bit too much there. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome, Alvin. And you know, Alvin, the other thing I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody who has been sharing, is that you are speaking from your individual, your unique experience. And that's what makes our learning community rich and makes this a real example, even though it's a scenario, but adds reality to it. I just want to go back to something that Goldie said, because, and Wayne, I see that your hand is raised, so don't lose your thought. I want to go back to something that Goldie said, because I want to underline, you know, Goldie made a very generous personal disclosure, which is that she acknowledged that there are students that she found that she actually liked more than other students. He also acknowledged that there were times, and she realized in hindsight that it was problematic, but there were times when she acted her favoritism out, and that created problems going forward. And I want to thank Goldie for sharing that, A, because she's following our guidelines, and B, because I'm fairly confident that Goldie is not the only person in this learning community conversation today who has experienced feeling a stronger connection to some patients or some clients than, and Hillary writes, no, she isn't. Thank you, Hillary. And I will neither confirm nor deny whether Hillary has had the same experience or not, but she is supporting the fact that Goldie is not alone. And I agree, because I have had opportunities where there were folks that I felt a stronger positive transference to. And I had to be very aware of that, because I did want to extend them more of an accommodation. And as Goldie said, and I agree, that can present significant problems for that individual, for us, and for the community that we may be working in. I'm going to go to Wayne, and then Kelly, I see that you have your hand raised. We'll give you the floor to comment as well. So Wayne, what did you want to add or say?
Well, first, if I was going to say, a carrier doesn't have to deliver mail if you have a vicious dog. He has to put his safety at risk. So, you know, they got a little thing on their head, you know, and the spray, you know, but they don't have. But the thing is, you know, okay, like I'm gonna say from a management perspective and from a line worker, you know. So I'm gonna take the post office 3 shifts. So like we said, we gonna all be human. So Alvin got his favorites, maybe he treating them, giving them 15 minutes. Goldie got hers, you know, because we all favorites, and I got mine, you know what I'm saying? But see, that's where the conflict's gonna come in. Because now we ain't got no consistency. You know what I'm saying? Because his favorites ain't my favorite, her favorites ain't my favorites. So
Yep.
you're not consistent.
Yep.
It's not going to, and that's why we got to try to go by the rules. You know, all this is in theory. And now I see it too, because now when I came up the ranks in the Postal Service, right? And that's one of the reasons I left and I changed fields anyway. But anyway, I was a line worker, and then I wasn't I used to work 2 jobs. I wasn't the greatest worker. I mean, I would fall asleep while I was keying mail and walk, step off, and what they call step off, and, take breaks longer than was I supposed to. And then when I became management and trying to enforce all these rules, even all of that was thrown into my face. So, well, when you was this, you used to do that. And that's what makes it hard also when you become a supervisor and then they ask you to supervise the same people. So that's why, then when they put me in another area, they didn't know me. And then it was easier to kind of enforce those rules. But I'm just saying, if everybody is doing their own thing, it's going to be hard to to enforce any rules, what I'm saying? And that's why we got to try as best to be as consistent with it. And that's why I believe, like I said, and this is, I'm reading more into, that's why Jody thought she could do that, because somebody else allowed her to do it. So then she freaked out.
And that's possible. And it could be for other reasons. It may be because she really just wants more time with her boyfriend. Who knows? We don't know yet.
No.
Yeah. So Kelly, the floor is yours. And then we're going to go to Lyra, and then we're going to go to Goldie. And then I think we've come to the point where it's time for somebody to talk to Jody. So Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd like to give a brief example of what happened once when I chose not to play favorites with somebody that was a favorite. And instead of treating them differently, I treated everybody like they were my favorite. So this person was a special case. Their parents were very wealthy. There'd been a lot of arrangements to get them into the detox, high profile with multiple agencies. And this person decided on the evening of New Year's Eve that they wanted to leave the detox to go to the sobriety powwow and collect a sobriety coin. And I thought that that was not a good idea. We talked about it. They were determined. And I said, well, since I'm already going to the powwow and I'm the night counselor, I can get permission from my supervisor, which was really important, and called the director of the powwow, who I happen to know. And I said, may I please have 40 sobriety coins? So I went, picked up 40 sobriety coins. The director and the head man did some prayer on the coins, came back to the detox after my shift with permission, and lined them all up, everybody who was awake, and everybody got a sobriety coin instead of just the one person who wanted to leave. And then I gave the extra coins to the people that had received the coins, and they ran around the detox, sneaking them under everybody's pillow who was still asleep, so that the detox fairy, the detox coin fairy, was in action with everybody on the floor. And so instead of one person leaving because they were resentful that they weren't the favorite, or leaving because they thought that they were owed something, everybody benefited, because if I couldn't do it for one, I couldn't do it for all. So instead of not doing it for one, I chose to find a way to make it creatively happen for all, which made it just the most amazing thing that could have ever happened. Rather than just ignoring it, it became an opportunity to make this grand gesture to show everybody they were the favorites.
And that was a win-win-win-win-win-win-win. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kelly. Such a beautiful example. Goldie, and then Alicia, go ahead.
Yeah, I
Oh,
know
you forgot me, Paul. I'm sorry. I put my hand down.
Oh, I'm sorry,
It's
Lyra.
okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, Goldie is saying, go ahead, Lyra. Go ahead.
I just wanted to
Sorry
say
to miss you.
to
Yeah.
Kelly, great example, because everyone needs to be on the same page. What we do not want is staff splitting or client splitting, where now I can go to this person and get this result,
Right.
or I can treat this patient or this resident different than I treat everyone else. And I'm splitting the program, I'm splitting the individuals and creating different feelings within the individuals.
Yes. And Lyra, great point. And you're also, by doing that, you're also training people to take advantage of that. Like, oh, well, I know that if I go to Jason, it's going to be one response, but if I go to Noel, it's going to be a different response. And I want the Noel response as opposed to the Jason response. So again, you kind of get what you grow in some ways. Goldie, the floor is yours. And then we're going to go to Alicia. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I know we got other scenarios, but I wanted, Lyra hit the nail right on the head. What I was going to say, that you can start creating chaos because, you know, I'm going to be transparent. I've seen some things where other staff members allowed students to do, and I've questioned them, you know, professionals, like, why did you let so-and-so do this and whatever. I've had my, you know, my colleagues come to me and say, Goldie, you know, why did you let, you know, so then the students see us bickering. So that, you know, and so you can just start to create chaos. So the best thing is to stick with, even though it might hurt me, is to stick with the set of rules and consequences for everyone.
Yep. Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you. Alicia, yeah, go ahead.
So chaos is what this brings, those behaviors bring when you're playing favorites. I call it, so our census, I work inpatient, I'm the director here at Blaisdell Addiction Treatment Center. And like another gentleman stated, we're 24/7. So we get a lot of, you know, opportunities for triangulation and splitting. So we have a 52 census, and in a nutshell, I call it the rule of 52. What I do for one, I'm going to do for 52. That's
right.
It.
Yeah. The rule of 52.
52.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So I just want to take a moment and look at consistency is key to protocols so that there isn't a surprise response to the consequences. Thank you, Shannon. Oh, and there's something else just popped in the chat. Maria writes, being consistent and not playing favorites should also happen among staff. There are so many heightened experiences among staff when there are favorites. Absolutely, because favorites implies that someone's not a favorite. And that's not a great place to be in. Before we hear from Wayne and from Jason, Noel, I wanted to know if I could ask you a quick follow-up question.
Sure.
So you had mentioned, and there's a reason I wanted to come back to this, you had mentioned earlier that there was a reason behind why all visitors leave the residence at a particular time. Would you be willing to restate that? Your understanding of what that rationale might be.
To the person in particular, Jody?
Yeah, like you had said earlier that one of the things you would focus on, that you're not trying to single out Jody, you're not punishing her, that this guideline exists for a particular reason. And I'm just wondering if you would elaborate, restate that reason and just elaborate on it a little bit.
Oh, it depended on the circumstance, but I could say, you know, because of the insurance, our visitor is not covered after 10 o'clock at night. And that's not an unusual thing,
Right.
actually. Or the police could assume, the community police could assume something else is happening here. They're already accustomed to how many cars are in the parking lot or something like that. There's always other reasons that rules are established for the organization. So, you know, I would choose one of them, particularly maybe, you know, letting her know that it would be safer for her and her boyfriend, you know, to end it at 10, something like that.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, I want to underline what Noelle is suggesting. It's the differentiation between the communication of I'm coming for you and hey, we're in this together, and these are why we have these guidelines and we're enforcing them together.
Yeah, it's not personal like we started. And the minute that you let them know that, you know, they de-escalate, because the escalation starts when somebody begins to think it's personal. You're picking on me. I'm not your favorite. All of those things that people were talking about.
Yes.
That is not the problem. So
yes,
and de-escalate it by giving the facts, you know, that protect them, you know, things that we're thinking about them, but in a holistic way.
Absolutely. And Susan Beth just wrote in the chat, and I don't know if people saw this, but I would agree. It's non-accusing. What Noelle is suggesting is not accusing. Agreed, Jason. It's not accusing Jody of doing anything. It's just simply saying, hey, we're all working together for safety. Safety for you, safety for everyone in this facility. We're all working together for safety. What a different approach. What a different approach. We're going to go to Wayne, we're going to go to Jason, and then we're going to talk to Jody. Da-na-na-na. Go ahead, Wayne.
You know, I found out you got to try to treat people, it has to be consistent, you know, across the board.
Yeah.
You know, and dealing with the population, you know, people may who use alcohol and drugs, you know, they may tell you, oh, listen, you know, they don't snitch, they don't do this, they don't do that. You know, I almost guarantee you 9 out of 10 times, if you treat one of them different, it's going to get back. They're going to tell somebody else. One of the other residents, other people is going to get back, whether it's maybe for self-esteem that you treat me different or whatever. But from my experience, if you treat one person different, it's going, you know, even though they may say, you may tell them that's the worst thing you could do anything. You don't want to get in bed with them anyway, because once you get compromised by them, they got you over a barrel anyway, you know what I'm saying? Because you broke the rules. So now they're going to use that against you if you don't. So now you done compromise yourself, you know? So it will get back out. So I like Alicia's whatever 52 rule. You got to treat them all the same, you know, take all the personal out of it. Because like I said, it's they're gonna use it against you. You know, and like you said, somebody said, when you talk to Jody, just say it in a calm manner, you know, state the rules, and that's it.
Fantastic. Jason, what do you think? Any final thoughts before we talk to Jody?
You know, Wayne killed it with what he just said, you know, because we've done this work in the community, right? And they talk. So you know, well, I said, you know, my dog ate my homework and he gave me a free pass. That word travels through the house. And so now I'm going to one up it. My dog and my hamster ate my paperwork. And they just build on it, right? Because I want to be more, and a lot of times this scenario ain't true, but they know that they pull on your heartstrings. We get into this work because we love to work with people. We love to help people. And the sadder, the more extravagant the story, they know they got you and they reel you in and they get what they want. So just being mindful that you save your excuse, I don't want to hear it, this is the rule. And you maybe be more mindful than that, but ultimately you don't let the reasoning cloud your decision-making, because once you do, the word travels, boom. And now you've just set this crazy precedent and now you're probably looking for a job somewhere else.
Possible, it's possible. And I just want to look at Willamette writes, retaliation could cause a behavior. The word, Kelly writes the word snitch in all capitals. I have the conversation with the resident about snitch is only loyal to themselves. Who are we loyal to now? Recovery, and those here are trying hard to protect their recovery. Yes. All right. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Noelle. I see your hand. Go ahead, please.
You know, when I was younger, I worked with a lot of adolescents, you know, really rough from the streets. And one of the things that they would do would tell the next kid that came in, you know, Miss Noel's a straight shooter. Don't give her a hard time. And the difference between that coming from the group of kids was very powerful in being able to, you know, continue with the rules that they understood. They understood it as straight shooting and fair. And so if you can establish that, you know, it's not hard to not take it personal and then not take it personal. And they would literally take your back. You know what I mean? So the whole thing's like a team approach if you're sticking to the reasons that these things are established. The reason we have to do something is usually not personal. And when I was listening to all these personal things, and the counselors or the staff has their own internal dialogue going on that's really, you know, changing the dynamic. So I think that's something to really look at in this, you know, more so than anything is what are you saying and how do you really feel? So you understand that interpretation is what goes out to others, you know. So I think, you know, I think when it comes to healthcare, we have to be focused on healthcare. And sometimes the environments don't always look like a healthcare treatment facility. Looks like a bedroom, like a living room. Take your dishes. You know what I mean? So we still have to remember, you know, what we're doing here with our clients. And I think that changes how we view things. If we can recognize that the environment is not what's what we're doing. We're providing healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want to be fulfilling our role within the context of what we're doing, why we're there, and that is not the same thing as being in one's living room entertaining guests.
You know, and I think my perspective comes from a lot of things that I've done in life. You know, I've sat on hospital boards or behavioral health boards or the services that provide funding for facilities, and why do we provide it for this facility and not that facility, things like that. So my perspective sometimes comes from a macro level, but at the same time always looking at the individual that is in front of you. Do you know what I mean? Feel comfortable. It's never about me. It really isn't. It's about what we're providing.
Yeah. And it's so, I appreciate that's kind of, that was sort of your last sentence. It's never about me, it's about what we're providing. And it's very hard for it at times not to feel like it's about us. And that's where we come back to that video. That's where we come back to the awareness. That's where we come back to the preparation and the practice so that we can do the job and be consistent and not have it be about us. Go ahead, Noelle.
The one place that it becomes about us is with the other staff. It's the team, you know, it's that's where problems come from. I never had problems from patients. Never had problems from clients. They don't create problems. The staff creates problems. The understanding of the staff team player or not player or whatever it is. And the organization often will create problems. I've been in organizations that all they want you to do is bill, and find whatever's billable, whether or not it's appropriate. So things like that are the problems, you know. So it's if you think about it, it's not usually about the patient, even though somebody's ranting and raving somewhere. We understand that they're presenting.
Yep. And that's that's information about where they are at that particular moment.
Right.
And that doesn't have, that's not necessarily quote unquote the problem. Right. So let's come back to the scenario. There's Jody who lives there. She's in a sober residence for women. Her boyfriend, Andy, is visiting. We are Dave. And we are the only person there at this particular time. And it is fast approaching or maybe even exceeded the curfew hour. And Andy is still there. Andy is the boyfriend. So my question is if we're going to address this situation, if I'm Dave, how do I proceed? How should I address it? What should I do? Open to guidance and suggestions at this particular moment. What should I do? How, yeah, go ahead, Lyra. And I'm going to ask you and keep you focused on the scenario. I'm Dave. What are your suggestions of what I should do? Go ahead,
And I'm speaking to Jody, or I'm just giving you suggestions.
You're just giving me suggestions at this point. I'll speak to Jody as Dave, but go ahead.
The suggestions would be definitely stay in MI.
Okay.
Motivational interviewing using I statements and active listening.
Okay.
Parroting what she's saying back to you, so she'll know that you're listening to her, that you're not just creating. Be very specific in lining up the protocol, that it's not you, it's agency policy.
Okay.
So it's not an individual, well, I can make separations. No, my job might be on the line.
Okay.
So also, just I would like to, but I can't. However, you would help her to understand that the same way she has responsibilities, you have responsibilities. And there's things that she carries out and may not want to, you have to carry out and may not want to, as being responsible and encouraging her to be responsible.
Okay. That was a lot of suggestions. I'm considering them. Wanda, I saw that your hand was raised. What did you want to make any suggestions to me?
Yeah, I would have asked to speak to the client privately.
Okay.
To remind, I understand that your boyfriend is here, but the agency, we have certain rules. And at this time, we've exhausted the visiting time. And and as the last speaker stated, this, go down it again, just so, and make sure that she understands by asking her, is there something that you're confused about, and allow her to dismiss her company, while you're still present. And then after that is over, I think I would just have another conversation just to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Wanda. Several suggestions. I'll entertain them all. Yeah. Wayne, any thoughts, any suggestions? And again, I'm asking everybody to really focus on offering me suggestions about how I'm going to talk to Jody. So go ahead, Wayne. Any thoughts, any suggestions about how I would talk to Jody?
Well, I don't know. I think you said how you handle the situation. First, I would get, Andy's not spazzing out or whatever. I would get Andy out of the facility, get Andy going. And then once Andy's gone, then I would deal with, then I would address Jody's behavior, because I don't want her to, kind of like give her a stage and to be an audience with Andy, then she may act out. First, I would get him out. Now the whole house maybe is secure.
Okay.
And then I would, all of those good things that were said, I would try to implement those things. But first thing is get Andy out.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Kelly's given that a thumbs up. She likes that idea of getting Andy out. Excellent. Now I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Samantha writes, go around each room to take a head count with security. Maybe you can speak to client on the side, as was already suggested. And at times, I find that a warning of a required action makes the expected action happen a bit easier. Rely on policy for the exceptions. Ensure she understands the exception and commend if follow through happens. Yep. Becky writes, prep myself first to know what I'm going to say. Make sure I'm checking in with myself to ensure that I can be the calm in the situation. Yeah, Becky, thanks for putting that, being self-aware and checking in with oneself too. Does anybody else want to offer any other suggestions about what I can do? Because I've got a very large basket full, but I'm open to taking some more if anybody has some other suggestions that they'd like to offer about how I could speak to Jody. Okay, so Willamette says review the client handbook guidance agreement and talk about program client compliance guidelines. Okay, got it. Okay, now Goldie, I'm not sure if it's possible, if you're able to unmute. Are you able to unmute for a minute?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. So Willamette writes, just speak to them with respect, coming in and explain that the visiting hours have ended, and state that you will give them a moment to say goodbye. Okay. Oh, Will Marie says that. Excellent. And Goldie, stay unmuted for a moment. Wayne, was there something else you wanted to add?
I was just saying, I was just looking. I think when I said review with client handbook guidelines, I don't know, it seemed like with Jody, when a patient is agitated like that, sometimes I don't think that, you're not always able to like talk to them, they're not ready to listen to reason.
Okay.
So, educating them about, the handbook and all that may not work. So, I'm gonna have to use another tactic, like I said, be more human. First, trying to quell the situation, try to calm her down.
Yep.
But like I said, I don't think she was thinking rational. So you could show her all of the, handbook and that, and she may not respond. She may not respond.
Right. And you're being very clear about the timing of when to do these things.
Right.
Okay, great. So Goldie, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. Are you able to activate your camera?
Here I am. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. Now, Goldie, the reason I'm tapping you is I'm wondering, do you think that you could be Jody? Do you think that you have kind of an understanding enough of the character? She's there with her boyfriend, Andy. She's living in this residence. Do you think you could be her just briefly for our little scenario?
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to be Dave. I'm going to be all of you. And Goldie is going to be Jody. Okay? You've all given me excellent suggestions. And keep in mind all the wonderful suggestions in the world. I'm gonna do my best to factor all of those in. And I'm gonna try the strategy that I think might work in this particular moment. And I'm gonna start by just prefacing what I've chosen I'm going to try and do based on everything that I heard is Wanda early on suggested that I try to speak to Jody alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to her door. I'm going to knock on her door and I'm going to ask her if it's okay if she comes out in the hall, if she and I could just have a moment to chat. Okay? So that's where I'm starting, and then we'll see where it goes with Jody. But I'm going to start off with the very clear suggestion that Wanda gave that I heard very clearly in the beginning. And if you have questions about that, or if you question the rationale for that, after Goldie and I are done sort of playing out whatever happens, and I have no idea what's going to happen because Goldie and I did not meet for 3 or 4 hours before this learning community conversation and practice and plan it all out. In fact, Goldie never even knew I was going to ask her to be Jody. So who knows what's going to happen? I love that. But I'm going to start, I'm factoring in everything that everybody said, but I'm going to start with the specific suggestion that Wanda offered, because something about that feels very right to me. And I'm speaking very subjectively because I'm the Dave carrying it out at this particular moment. You may make a different choice. I'm going with what my gut is telling me is the right way to proceed at this particular moment. Okay? So, Jody, are we all set? Which I mean Goldie, yeah?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. So, knock, knock, knock.
Who is it?
Oh, hi, Jody. This is Dave from down at the front desk. I'm wondering if I could speak to you for just a moment.
Do we really have to talk right now?
Well, actually, if you could take a moment, now would be a really good time to speak. I'm a little bit concerned about the time because it's approaching our curfew time, and I'm wondering if you could just come out and you and I could have a brief chat.
Would you like for me to come outside, or would you like to come in the room?
Oh no, if you're okay, you just come out so we can speak privately. I know you're visiting with Andy, and I don't want to interrupt that.
All right, I'm coming. Give me
Excellent.
a sec.
Yeah, of course. Take your time.
Yes.
How are you doing tonight, Jody? I'm sorry to interrupt your visit. I know that you're visiting with Andy. How are you doing?
Yes, and I'm enjoying myself. I'm a little annoyed right now.
Okay. Again, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. And I'm really glad to know that you're enjoying yourself and that you're having a good visit with Andy. I did want to let you know, though, it's about 9 o'clock and it's time for visitors to actually exit the premises. So I just wanted to check in with you about that.
Okay, but all right, does he really have to go right now?
Well, clearly, this is an important visit, and I know you haven't seen him for a while, and I'm glad that you're having a good visit with him. Unfortunately, because it is almost 9, he does need to go now. Doesn't mean he can't come back tomorrow. And I would hate for you to lose the opportunity for him to come back. So actually, he really does need to go now.
So he can come back tomorrow?
Of course, absolutely. As long as you're continuing to, fulfill the guidelines of visitor, visits, of course, he's always welcome. We're so glad that he visits you and it makes you happy.
Can I walk him downstairs?
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Yeah, if you can walk him downstairs and just check in with me after you exit with him, that would be great. And I really appreciate that. Walking him downstairs is a great idea.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna bring him down. We're coming.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jody. And again, just check in with me after Andy has exited. And thank you very much for working with me on that.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. So let's pause it. Okay. Now, first, let me just say this. I know I picked the absolute right person to portray Jody. Goldie, I want to thank you so much for being willing to jump in.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Oh, Thank you.
Y'all gotta finish it. It's not finished.
Well, it actually is finished.
But she still got them up there. You gotta go back upstairs because she ain't bringing them down. She said she was gonna bring them down. You said she was difficult. You gotta go back up there. She just said that to get rid of you.
Actually, I
no,
couldn't.
because Mr. Paul, aren't you gonna stay? Because what I would do, I would stay there. And if she tried to go back in there, and I'm not gonna, come on, So no, I would not leave until both of them exited the room.
No, only reason I'm saying because Jody in the scenario was difficult. She's not.
Well, let's be very clear here. Now, this is a little scenario to demonstrate a couple of things. One is just because we may get information that somebody has been difficult in the past, be very careful with making the assumption that they're going to be difficult every single moment after that.
Right.
So I just want to be very clear about that. And I purposefully, because I wrote this scenario, I purposefully put that in the scenario because I wanted to see if people would make the assumption that she was going to be difficult in this moment. Okay. Now, what I can tell you is that Jody in this particular moment, as beautifully portrayed by Goldie, she presented with like, do you want me to come out? I'm annoyed and you're really wasting my time. That's how she started. Now, some people might think that's being difficult and that's being offensive or that's being disrespectful or whatever. Now, the thing that I want to throw out to you to consider is when Goldie as Jody very effectively portrayed that, how did I, with the desire to de-escalate the situation, because remember folks, we're talking about de-escalation. How did I choose to de-escalate that? What did you observe me do that de-escalate? Hey Goldie, hold off for just 1 minute. Let's let other people comment for just a second, and then I'd like you to jump in as the person who I was really talking with.
Okay.
So Willamette writes, talked about the guidelines and complacency. Paul spoke respectful, clear, and consistent. You reflected back her feelings. Yes, I reflected. Go ahead. Yep, go ahead, Lyra.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
Paul.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, you for me, I heard you that he can come back tomorrow. And that's what she focused on. Her mind went straight to, oh, he can come back tomorrow, which definitely de-escalated, because it was like, okay, you know what? Even if he has to leave now, I still have the opportunity to continue the visit tomorrow.
Yes.
So
yes.
It wasn't all negative. There was a positive side to it.
Yes. And you know something, Lyra? Thank you for pointing that out, because this is why I disagree with Wayne's interpretation that she's not going to follow through. Because when I said that he could come back tomorrow, she said, oh, he can come back tomorrow? And I said, yes. And she said, well, then I'll walk him out. And that leads me to believe that when she realized that he could come back tomorrow, that he wasn't going to be, kicked out of the building, but that he could come back tomorrow, she was like, okay, well, then I'll take some responsibility here and I'll walk him out. I believed her when she said that. Now, Wayne, if it would have played out that was just a line to get me to disappear, I would have had to gone back and address it. But I have to tell you, my experience in the moment, by the way Jody was responding, especially to that he could come back tomorrow, that I believed her when she saw that as an opportunity and that she was going to be part of the solution. Well, I'll walk him out. I'll exit. She offered that. I didn't ask her to do that. She offered that.
Right. No, I was going with the scenario. Now, maybe it was you know, it was a while back. I don't remember. I would have to see it. I thought I thought in the scenario that she gave you a difficult time. So I don't know. And I thought that's what she was actually acting out. So like I said, that's what I thought she was portraying. I would have to see I have to see what you wrote before, because I don't know exactly what you wrote.
Yeah, well, having written it, I can tell you exactly what I wrote. And I wrote it particularly to bring up this issue. And Wayne, I'm really glad you brought this up, because some people, they'll have this idea about the client, and it's a fixed idea. And the thing that I want to underline is that there's a problem with that, because if it's a fixed idea, it's hard to be in the moment with the client. And I had the great opportunity, because Goldie played it so beautifully. I had the real opportunity to be in the moment of where the client was feeling frustrated, was feeling annoyed, and yet that wasn't a problem because it was understandable. And somebody mentioned this in the chat, and Shannon, I see your hand, don't lose your thought. Somebody mentioned in the chat that I reflected back to her that this was an important visit, because she made it clear to me that it was an important visit. And Wayne, what it says in the scenario, and when you get the slides, you'll have it, but what it says is that she's been known in the past to make a scene.
Okay.
And again, I love the fact that for some people, they might hear that, or they may have that experience with the client, and that idea can become fixed, where they think in the past she made a scene, she's going to make a scene here. And what I can tell you is the way this scenario played out, there was no scene here. She didn't make a scene. It's understandable that she was annoyed, that she was frustrated. I accepted that, and I reflected it back. Shannon, the floor is yours.
I was going on her history.
Yep, I understand. I understand.
But see, and Mr. Paul, I'm going to address that in a minute.
Okay, we're going to let Shannon talk, and then we're going to let you address that. So go ahead, Shannon, go ahead.
I think it's really important to understand implicit bias. So understanding your preconceived notions before you go into the scenario of addressing Jody. If you don't check those biases prior to actually communicating with Jody, you're automatically going to escalate the situation and cause the client to automatically be upset and cause her to act in ways that she used to, because you're triggering her, possibly.
Right. And Shannon, that was so beautifully put. And Shannon, if it's okay, before Goldie responds, can I ask you one quick follow-up question?
Sure.
Based on what you just said, do you believe, based on what you observed, do you believe that I was managing my potential implicit bias?
I do believe so. I believe that you affirmed the client on how they felt, and that it was okay that they felt this way. But also coming with the, just the understanding that, hey, like, I do understand you're having a good time, but ultimately, we can't have this happen. And so I think you came with like a humility point, where you weren't just assuming that the client didn't know what was happening, or like you just came with the impression of just being in the moment.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you. And Shannon, please do confirm that to everybody that I neither paid you nor asked you to say any of what you just said.
No. I've never met Paul prior to this, so no.
Excellent. All right, Goldie, the floor is yours. And then we're going to look at what some people put in the chat. But I know that there was something you wanted to respond to. Please go ahead.
Yes, she hit the nail right on the head. That's what I was going to allude to, that because of your demeanor, I can relate to when I was co-teaching, and that even though I was the equal teacher in the classroom, I was a special ed teacher and I did the modifications and accommodations. However, I always ended up with a teacher who was, for lack of a better term, soft, right? So because I have such a deep voice, And because when I speak, I say what I say, and I mean what I say. You know, my co-teacher could tell Paul, you know, Paul, stop doing that. Paul, stop talking. And Paul wouldn't stop. So then Goldie would turn around, hey, did you hear what Miss So-and-so said? She asked you to stop talking. And Paul would stop talking. So then, you know, the teacher and I would have this conversation like, oh, Goldie, you know, they listen to you. No, they're going to listen to you too. And when you enforce the rules of the classroom, they're going to respect you. So, you know, you can't be Goldie, you know, that's obvious, but they have to understand that what you say is just as important as what I say. So maybe you might have been the perfect staff member to go and address Jody. And maybe Goldie, if Goldie had went up there and addressed her, you know, it might have been a drag out argument or whatever. So I'm comfortable with that as well. Not to say that you diminish the rules and the consequences, that, you know, you stood 10 toes down in it, but maybe in that moment, because of your soothing demeanor, you were the best staff member to go up there as opposed to another staff member. And I think that's just as valuable as well.
And again, what I demonstrated, and hopefully I did it effectively, but what I demonstrated or was attempting to demonstrate was using the skills and the tools to de-escalate the situation. To reflect back to the client the importance that I knew that this was an important visit, that I knew that she was feeling frustrated and annoyed, and that we were approaching the curfew, and how were we going to address that? How were we going to address that? So what I hopefully demonstrated was that de-escalation, and hopefully I demonstrated how we actually engaged in a partnership. Because I didn't ask her this, I didn't even make the suggestion. She said, can I walk him down? And I was like, what a great idea. Absolutely, you can walk him down. Thank you. Thank you for walking him down. You know, came from her. And I even said, thank you so much. After you're done with that, let's just check in.
Yes.
So, yeah. So Wayne, let me just quickly check the chat. Don't lose your thought. I'm going to just quickly check the chat. Everybody, please quickly check the chat. Wanda writes, you still have to approach the client without bias because of how she may have acted previously. I agree with that 100%, Wanda. We want to try and walk into the situation and be in the moment. Yes, we may know that from the past, but just because something happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in this moment. Susan Beth writes, it's difficult to let those thoughts of the individual go. You need to understand that people can change. We are all capable of being different, difficult, and unapproachable. However, we are capable of change, and the hardest part, having people who knew you when, you need to give them a chance to prove it. Yep. Wanda writes, this is not fair and not equitable. Wanda, can you, I'm not sure if you're responding to what Susan Beth wrote, meaning that if you hold on to the same idea about someone, that's what's not being fair and equitable because you're not acknowledging that the person can change. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yes, that's what I'm alluding to. When you approach with a previous mindset, and that's for any clients, that is not fair and it's not equitable, and other people will see you do that.
Yes. And you know what? I would go so far as to say, Wanda, that's not fair just in life in general.
Yes.
Because people are not fixed in their experience. And yeah, so I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. I'm going to just quickly go back to the chat for just a second. Jessica writes, the way Jody reacted in the past should be a help to strategize how to approach her in that moment. Yes, and I agree with you, Jessica. I did go in knowing that that was a possibility, and I was prepared, but I wasn't going to assume that that's what was going to happen. Help build a more positive way of communicating with each other. Hopefully that happened. Samantha writes, I do wonder how the scenario would go if Andy was the one who refused to leave. Wow, given he had nothing to lose. Well, actually, it's so
He
interesting.
does. He does got something to lose. He won't be back up in there. He got something to lose.
Yeah, he's definitely got something to lose. Yes. Yeah, he could be barred from the building.
Correct.
He could be barred from, socializing with Joe.
Correct.
So potentially, but that I appreciate the raising of that question because he's also involved. And again, I'm going to let Wayne make whatever comment he wants to make, and then I want to come back to something that I borrowed from Wanda in the beginning. And Wanda, actually, you'll be the first person that I'm going to ask this question of, if that's okay with you. But we're going to hear from Wayne. And then, or possibly even lose Jody. You're right, Shannon. That's a possibility too. So Wayne, the floor is yours.
Yeah, a staff like me, I could have, escalated the situation because now, like I said, not only going by history, but I was reading the situation. I read something totally into it that wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? I read it completely different. I read it that she was being difficult. Forget that she was difficult in the past. All I knew, she was being difficult. And that's why I said, well, you're not acting it out right. But the whole thing is, that's what happens. Sometimes we read things into situations, or go based on history. Yep. So, and you paid me to play the counter the other part. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I played because, so not knowing that would have escalated the situation, because I was ready to, that she was giving you a difficult time, and I was like, with you, all I would have done is being direct, and you was just being nice and going back and forth with her. But that call for that situation, because you knew her, how she behaved in the past. So when you addressed it, you came at her, you approached it in a whole different manner. But you have to know the situation. You got to know the history, and I didn't know it. That's why I kept saying show it, but I read what I wanted to read into it.
Yeah. And you know something, I really appreciate that you can acknowledge that, because that is the way to not act it out, is to know that it's possible, that we can, and Wayne, you just gave a beautiful example. You said, I totally added something to the situation that wasn't even there. And as human beings, that's what we do. We can do that. That doesn't mean we're bad. It doesn't mean we're wrong. It doesn't mean we're not professional. It means we're human beings. And it means that we all have our triggers and or buttons, whichever word you prefer, or if there's other words that you prefer. We all have our history that we walk into the situation with. And what I tried to demonstrate, and Goldie, again, I thank you for your partnership in this. What I tried to demonstrate was being in the moment with the client. Yes, I knew what I knew, and I was able to suspend it and be in the moment with this person and not assume she was going to be giving me a hard time, or the fact that she was having feelings about it was giving me a hard time. Okay, we're going to go to Lyra, we're going to go to Jason, and then we're going to come back to Wanda, because I want to underline something about the very beginning of the conversation. Lyra, the floor is yours.
Question/comment. If we have preconceived notions about clients' behaviors, then would we be truly actively participating in active listening? Would we be listening to respond, or will we be listening to hear? Because if we already believe that she's going to come with a response, we're responding before we even give her the opportunity to comment. We're responding based on the information about her being someone who acted out previously. So even our approach will be different if we're not coming in, as you said, with an open mind of this is now, this is not yesterday.
Correct. And you raise a critical point, I think, to effective de-escalation is one of the before things that any of us can do is we can ask ourselves, what is our preconceived notion or understanding of this person? And let's put that out on the table for ourselves so we can choose not to act on that. It's information. It's what we might know. It's what we might fear. And we can still be in the moment with that person. Jason, the floor is yours.
So I shared a video in the chat. I love my TED Talks. And Simon Sinek just kills it on how to confront. And it's that, you know, you can validate, I hear you, and you just repeat your message over and just hold it. Now you're pushing back to that person to self-reflect. And it might be uncomfortable, but that just helps you stick to your message and not getting that back and forth and push that individual to reflect. And if they have questions, you can repeat your statement over, but don't get into the back and forth. Validate, I hear you, and that's it.
Yeah, and let me be clear about two things in terms of what Jason is saying about confrontation. Because I think if you think about the conversation that I had with Jody, AKA Goldie, there was no confrontation there. And I want us to be very clear that confrontation, even if it's done with great skill, can be escalation. So keep that in mind. And what we're talking about is de-escalation. And I also want to be very clear too, because Jason, I thank you for sharing that link. I have not seen this TED Talk. I'm happy to look at it. Because we all want to be, of course, critical consumers of. You're hopefully a critical consumer in our learning community conversation. You're kind of taking what you like and leave the rest. And you know, in the learning community, hopefully you're considering everything, but you're taking what you like and leave the rest, of course. But to Jason's point, there is a difference between telling somebody, I hear you, and communicating to someone that you've heard them. I'm going to say that again. There is a difference between saying to somebody, I hear you, and communicating to somebody that you've heard them. What you saw me demonstrate, and again, I'm basing it on my memory of it, but what I hopefully demonstrated in my conversation with Jody in the role play with Goldie, I communicated, hopefully you saw me demonstrate communicating to Jody that I heard her. I never once said, I hear you. So I just want you to be clear about the distinction between those two things, because I heard you is not the same thing as communicating to somebody you hear them. Okay, so I invite everybody to look at this resource that Jason shared with us, because Jason, you're like a treasure chest, fantastic of resources. Thank you. And of course, whenever we look at any resources, folks, we're always looking at them from the perspective of what resonates for us, what works for us, what can we take from this that will help us to better engage and serve and care for ourselves. Those are always the things we're going back to. So before we hear from Goldie and then we hear from Wayne, I want to just check in with Wanda. And Wanda, you may recall that I said before I started the conversation with Jody that I was going to take your suggestion of speaking to her, going up to her room, knocking on the door, and asking to speak with her alone. First, if it's okay, can I ask you two questions? So question one, how did I do with that strategy? Were you okay with the way I managed it, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, okay. And why do you think that I chose to go with your suggestion?
I believe that you chose to go with my suggestion because one, it makes it personal.
Yes.
You have to treat, you wanted to treat her just as if you would treat anyone else.
Yes.
And giving her the opportunity to own the situation that was created. And because you did not address her with her past behaviors. And again, and we should not do that, because the other thing is that Jody or any other person may have had past behaviors because of the way someone else approached them.
Yes.
And set off triggers.
Right.
So you have to go, you have to approach people, you have to let people, you have to approach people as humans and have some, be empathetic. And I think that's exactly what you did. And when Jody said, what can I dismiss my guest? Yes, that's allowing her to own it, to be human, and because initially when you knocked on the door, she was just a tad, disturbed.
Who is it?
Right. But you
Bad moment.
right. You still maintain some peace about yourself, that this was not any kind of an escalated situation. You can't always, and I appreciated that you didn't meet her where she was at or match energies, because you easily could have matched her energy when she responded to you. Now, had you done that, it would have went off the rails. That's my response.
Thank you. And
welcome.
first, let me say, Wanda, thank you for your suggestion. It felt very right to me.
Okay.
And I really appreciate hearing what you said, because when you made the suggestion, it was my gut feeling that that is exactly what you wanted to communicate to her, that you are respected. I'm treating you with privacy. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable in front of anybody else. And could we just have a moment to check in about this? Because I need your help. And that is that is what really drew me to your suggestion. So hopefully I demonstrated that.
Yes, you did.
Okay, good. All right, so we're gonna hand it over to Goldie and then to Wayne, and
Yes.
then we're gonna move forward with it. Go ahead.
Just one last reflection.
Please.
What Wanda said. You could have matched her, and you could have went in there with a preconceived notion, and you could have matched her energy with your and I, once again, because I don't have a problem with being transparent, I've done that. And I'm like, you know what, because you're not gonna outlast me. I'm gonna have the last word. And in retrospect, it didn't always turn out. I might have gotten the last word, but the whole vibe was still negative.
They'll remember how you made them feel.
Yep. And the one thing that I took from the video, the first suggested video, was that ego. Was that your ego? Check your ego. Check your ego at. I'm sorry. Check your ego at the door. It's not about you. It's about being consistent. So you checked your ego at the door. You weren't trying to posture, and say that, I'm the staff member and you're going to do what I say. You wanted everything to, and not only for Jody, but also so that the other clients or residents in the facility, so that they could have some peace. Because Jody could have got the party started and she could have set it off, and then there would have been hell and chaos and confusion for the rest of the evening.
Yeah.
So you have to take those things into consideration as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, Goldie, you made me think of one other point that I've actually never considered, but you made me think of this, and I'll throw it out there. And I never even imagined this until Goldie said what she just said. Imagine, folks, if other residents who live in the building, and this just occurred to me, like, so hello, what, wake up, Paul, but this just occurred to me, is what if other residents in the facility either overheard my conversation with Jody in the hall, or some of them may have been walking through the hall and they may have seen us talking. Goldie, you just helped me to consider that that also has a positive, and Willamette writes, a domino effect. That also has a positive domino effect because I'm showing other people. I mean, that wasn't my intention, and it had never even occurred to me that that could be happening until you said what you said, Goldie. But that could also have a positive impact on the overall environment. So I want to throw out that, like, yes, I followed Wanda's suggestion. Yeah, it's good for the environment, Samantha. Absolutely. I followed Wanda's suggestion, and it never even occurred to me that that could have a positive effect on the overall environment as well. Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much, Goldie. Wayne, the floor is yours.
Yeah, you know, as we shared earlier, you know, anyway, I'm human, and some people you like more than others, or you dislike for whatever reason. And so for me, I have to understand, you know, transference and counter-transference. Because, you know, going into the situation, you know, I can handle it totally differently if, you know, if I'm dealing with some kind of transference. And, you know, I like the way you handle it. You know, if I have some feelings, personal feelings about this person, or reminds me of something, I may become more, you know, I may become more provocative and say things to provoke the situation and to escalate the situation. So that's why, and read more into the situation than I want. Like Wanda said, then, you know, I would have like matched the energy, and then wait a minute, I'm gonna show you who I am, but who run this spot and all this. And
Right.
then that, you know, and then it's gonna escalate. So I have to understand me, you know, and understand my emotions. And listen, we come in every day with different, you know, we're human. You don't know what kind of day you may have, whatever. My wife may have said something to me or whatever. So I have to understand myself and check my motives, you know, before even, you know, maybe in addressing them. How we talked, I don't know, was it this trainer? Maybe I need to stop and pause and before I go upstairs and even talk to her.
Yes.
You know, instead of just with a knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
It's not going to come out, you know, it's not going to be productive, not going to come out good.
Right. And again, our goal is to de-escalate the situation, make it a win-win for everybody, not to escalate it. And before I hand the floor over to Noelle, I want to just touch on something that Goldie said, because Goldie, this really, when you said this, it really was not lost on me. And I just want to repeat it for the learning community, which is, you said, you know, I was committed to getting the last word. I was going to get the last word. And maybe I got the last word, but the overall feeling of the interaction was not positive. And again, I really appreciate that powerful self-reflection, because think of it, folks. Yeah, maybe we get the last word, but what's the price we've paid? What's the price we've paid? What's the price we've made the client pay? What's the price the program and the organization have paid? And you got your last word, but you paid a big price for it. And it's not a win-win situation for anybody. And remember, de-escalation as a process requires practice. It requires this kind of reflection that we're doing in the learning community. Noelle, the floor is yours. Can't hear you, Noelle. We see your lips moving, but we don't hear a word.
About that. One of the things that I noticed, and I put in the chat, was Mr. Rogers. I don't know if anybody remembers him.
Yeah, of course.
Yes,
Yeah.
he could talk to any child, any age, any culture, any religion, any type of behavior. And he could, communicate, de-escalate, and even have them like calm enough to, okay, now it's time to take a nap. And they would follow the kids. If you watch the kids, it didn't matter what kids. I've had nieces, nephews, my own, whatever. It was amazing to see how proper communication and with de-escalation the whole time, because that's what he was always doing with children. He was always de-escalating as he was addressing all kinds of issues, sex, age, culture, you name it. So it's really interesting, and that's what you brought to mind when Goldie was playing Jody, and the way that you went in with the intention of communicating clearly and de-escalating clearly. So
yeah, and Noelle, I want to add one thing to what you said, because I appreciate having such a powerful, like, iconic example. And I want to throw this out and see if you also observe this, that I also went into the moment with Jody trying to understand it from her perspective.
Sure.
Was that, is it fair to say that was there too?
I think that's what Mr. Rogers did, not knowing these individual children on television. That was the miracle of Mr. Rogers. He was very iconic because he could reach in to a screen and do that, personalize things for all those children. It was really amazing to watch him, I think. So
thank you. Thank you, Noelle. So a couple of things have come in the chat. The price is severing trust and the inability to build respect between clients and staff. Absolutely, Wanda. Maynard writes, without peer support, I had no one else that could understand the challenges I faced. I had to learn how to recover. Absolutely, especially if you don't have peer support. Wanda writes, the tone needs to be consistent even with being direct. That takes practice, truly. Susan Beth writes, Mr. Rogers was tremendous. His life story was amazing, and he was his portrait. I guess that meaning he was what he portrayed himself to be. Samantha, will we get a recording of the training from today and last Thursday? It is possible to give people access to a recording of it if they want it. So you should know. And Jason lets us know that Mr. Rogers was not transgender friendly. I didn't know that, or did not know that about Fred Rogers, the person / television personality. Charles writes, the price is also not sleeping at night, thinking about how you could have done it different. Yeah, and Charles, thanks for adding that, because that's what these kind of learning communities are for. These are places for us to work together and give each other support and explore this material together, so that maybe we have less sleepless nights and maybe we feel less alone in this work. So I want to thank everybody for everything that you're bringing to our learning community conversation. We have just a couple of other final things I'd like to touch on. As you can see, we're getting very close to 12 o'clock, and I do want to leave time for you to be able to complete the evaluation. So just a couple of other things to consider as we go forward. We are going to be making these slides available to you. If you do want to have access to a recording of parts 1 and parts 2, do email us and let us know that you'd like that access, and I think we can make that link available to you. So a couple of things to keep in mind, and again, these are just tools that are available for your consideration for effective principles of effective. And if I was going to edit this slide, I would say principles for effective nonverbal and verbal intervention. So remaining calm vocally as well as non-vocally, physically remaining calm. Isolate the individual when possible. And again, the suggestion to do that in the scenario with Jody felt very right to me. Being aware of our nonverbal body language. If we are talking, keeping it simple, as Wayne said earlier, and I agree with him, it is not the time to necessarily bust out the manual of client behavior. There may be another time down the road to do that, but we want to keep things simple. Hopefully I demonstrated using reflective language, also using silence, where the person can have a moment to reflect on what they've just heard or what they've said, and then see what their response may be. And then being very clear about our tone of voice, how quickly we're speaking, all these paraverbal communications, because they can either escalate or de-escalate a situation. So again, I just throw these 7 points out for you to consider in regard to that communication, that the effective communication that we've been focusing on. So the only other thing that I'd really like us to focus on is this model called the ABC model. I throw this model out for you to consider, and I'm going to ask you to do a quick application of it, which is that the A is where we subjectively observe a person in a situation, and we sort of pay attention to what are the feelings that they're showing, what is their affective state, what emotions are we seeing? B, what's their behavioral functioning? How are they behaving? How are they interacting physically? And C, what is their cognitive state? What is their thinking like? What is their speech like? Are they making sense? So I share this model with you, and I think that some of you are familiar with this and others of you were not from part 1, but I share this model with you because we can always go back to this to do a quick assessment before we jump in to a situation. We can assess the person's affective state, their behavioral functioning, their cognitive state in that moment, and that can help inform, approach them. So folks, back to this ABC model for just a moment. What I'm going to ask you to do, and again, I mentioned that I was going to ask you to do like a quick application of this. I would like you to apply either A, B, or C. So pick one, A, B, or C, and I want you to do a quick subjective assessment of me, your trainer. If you were going to assess my affective state, what feelings Paul is showing right at this moment, what would they be? If you were going to assess my behavioral functioning, what would you say my physical interaction was like? If you were going to assess my thinking, my speech, am I making sense? Pick one of those 3 letters, only one, and just do your quick assessment and write it in the chat. This is just an opportunity for you to have a quick taste of this particular model, okay? So this ABC model, excellent. Okay, so if you're choosing your cognitive state, and again, if you're choosing affective state, what affect are you seeing? If you're choosing cognitive state, what thoughts, what speech is the person, am I making sense? And if you're choosing behavioral state, what is it that you're actually observing? And you can put it in the chat. Yeah, excellent. Okay, and again, it's your subjective assessment. So whatever you assess, not obsess, whatever you assess is perfectly, I'm asking you to do a quick application of that. Yep, okay. So people are B, very involved and good communication skills. Kelly writes B, calm. Sosa, A, affective state, calm. So again, it's your subjective understanding, just as a way of applying the model. That's all. I'd like you to consider that this is a tool that you can use in any situation before you jump in. You can do a quick assessment of the person's affective state, their behavioral functioning, and their cognitive state. Okay, so these are again tools that you can use. So I mentioned to you that we have a scenario that we're going to send you. It's called Philip at the Front Desk. It's an invitation for you to look at that scenario and then apply the ABC model to Philip's presentation, his predisposition in the scenario, and then also to describe Barbara, the woman at the front desk, how her behaviors are impacting the situation. Now, I don't want to be a spoiler. I don't want to tell you too much about this scenario, but what I want you to know is that this is a tool that you can use this ABC model to apply to it. And what I'll tell you is that Barbara is the staff person and Philip is the patient and the client. So you can also answer these particular questions in regard to that scenario using that tool. And you'll notice, excuse me, that it says in the second bullet here, what techniques can Barbara use for effective de-escalation in this situation? So that should give you a little bit of a spoiler alert tip-off as to how the scenario might go. But what I want to underline is that this is an opportunity for you to continue the work in the learning community after we've concluded in the next few moments. So we're going to send you this scenario, and you can apply this ABC model to the scenario, and then you can also reflect on what Barbara, the staff person, could do to effectively de-escalate the situation. So, a couple of things to keep in mind before I show you the last slide and ask you to complete the evaluation. One, that we want to be thinking about self-care and team care as we're thinking about de-escalation. And we want safety for all. That means safety for you, safety for your team, safety for everybody in your building, your colleagues, and safety for the patients and the clients. And I want you to keep in mind that I intentionally started with safety for you. Also, that your state of well-being, your self-care has an impact on your team. And of course, we know it has a direct impact also on your clients and your patients, but it also impacts your team. And that de-escalation is a team process. We want to be interacting with and having the whole team involved in de-escalation. We talked about de-escalation as being a process, having a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that may sound familiar from part one, day one. Keep in mind that if we want to be effectively de-escalating, if we want to do that in a way that's safe and respectful and builds trust for everybody, the work to do that begins long before there's ever an incident. And doing de-escalation is hard work, and it requires reflection. It requires debriefing so that we can integrate what we've learned and the experience we've had. It requires recharging and refinement so that we can actually grow and become more effective at it, as opposed to burnt out by it. And I cannot say in big enough type, and this is pretty big typeface, no one de-escalates alone. If there's one thing you walk away with from part two of our conversation, it's that no one de-escalates alone. So, a couple of self-care reminders. One, know yourself and know where you experience and show stress in your physical body as well as your reactions with other people. Debrief with your team and other staff, because debrief is important. If you need to take time away, take it. If you can't take it immediately, take it in the future when you can. If you have effective and supportive supervision, please use that as a place to care for yourself and also to focus on your experience of de-escalation. And if you have employee assistance programs or other program or employer-sponsored benefits, use them. I'll tell you, I'll make an I statement here. One year, a number of years ago, this has happened less as I've focused on my wellness and self-care more. A number of years ago, I lost 335 paid hours of vacation. Paid hours of vacation. Because if I didn't use them, I was going to lose them. And I didn't use them. So I lost them. And that was my fault. They were paid. I could have taken that paid time, and I didn't. And I cannot thank you enough for everything that you've brought to this particular learning community conversation. I love this conversation, and I have very much enjoyed being in this learning community with each and every one of you. Thank you so much for what you brought to it. And again, folks, please take good care. Have a wonderful week. And honestly, I was looking forward to this, and I'm so glad this is the way I've started my week. Oh, you're welcome. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Take care.